So, okay, at this point, I'm going to open up to the floor. Cindy, you are first. So unmute yourself and ask Vikram your question.
All right. Vikram, thanks so much for the talk today. I've learned so much and so interesting to hear your journey. I was curious. So one thing you mentioned is that writing is in your bones. And I was wondering, and what I love about that is it feels, like you're tapping into this innate passion and well. And I was wondering if there's anything you do to keep writing to your bones or to ensure that you're writing to that essence, what is true to yourself.
Um, I don't think I have a very good answer to that. I would say, I mean, we all want to get published, right? And therefore the pressure of, understanding the structure of the form. Maybe I like better than genre. I think of the word form, right? As in something that is a pattern, right? A pattern language, right, is a better way. That's what I tell my kids, right? I never use the word genre. I say we have received patterns from ancient times and how to tell stories, right? So you can pay attention to patterns which do well out there in the world, but don't squeeze yourself into those forms and just do those, right? And within those patterns, you can twist them, right? You surprise people. If you think about, I mean, I watch, very, very, what's the word? I guess you would use formulaic, movies that when I want to turn my brain off, right? Uh, and I just want to relax and don't have to like make too much of an effort. But the best ones, even of those, are the ones that manage to surprise me, right? So they somehow like they twist somehow, and I'm like, damn, I didn't see that coming, right? So I think that's one thing, and then I've recently gotten really interested in the research on creativity, not just in fiction, but in other forms that people have been doing now over the last 2 or 3 decades. And there's certain things that they say that seem to be of interest to me. One is that, I'm sure you remember, like you've been told, take long walks, right? And that certainly works for me. I seem to get my ideas. A lot of my breakthroughs happen during long showers, which is really bad for the environment, especially in Oakland, where we always seem to have water drought. So I actually have a timer in my shower now, which I set to 8 minutes, and I try to obey. But I think anything that puts you in that half state between awareness and whatever the opposite of awareness is, right? That's where like really good things happen, right? Even in like when I take lots of naps, by the way, and there's actually now research that shows that naps are very good for creativity. And there's a long like list, you can find it, like famous people who napped or who like naps, and Salvador Dali is among them. And what he would do is sit in a chair and hold a ball in his fist, right? So if he started falling completely asleep, his hand would relax and the ball would fall and wake him up, right? Or jerk him out of that. So I think those are a couple of the things that I like to do that really work for me, right? There's, what's her name? Dorothea Brande, Brande, I believe. So I'm really bad at names, so correct me if I'm wrong. She wrote like one of the mothers of these craft how to write books. And she said that when you go into your studio in the morning, and she apparently knows artists and writers who have studios, that you should like sweep the floor. Anything that gives you, it's a repetitive motion that puts you in a sort of relaxed mode of being, right? So I buy all that. I really believe that.
Thank you. Amazing.
Joe, you're up next. Do you have a question? Oh, you're on mute, Joe.
Yeah.
I do, yes. Well, thank you, Vikram, for sharing your story and your journey. It was all very inspiring. I'm an agented writer. I've yet to be published with my agent. And I guess one question is that in your career as an author, like, can an author do anything to, I guess, like, control how and when their writings or their books can get optioned or gain interest from movie and film studios, even with the help of their agent?
Um, so I've never tried to do that, primarily because my agents are so good at it, right? But what I have noticed in the last ever since like social media became a big thing, right? That I have friends who are early publishing, and so one of the things that people have started doing, agents and publishers, and some of you might have gone through this, is like, how many social media followers do you have, right? Because the idea behind that commercially is that if you have 100,000 followers, investing in your book might actually be a good idea. It cuts down on some of their risk and their expense, right? Which I think is horrible, especially on the kind of writer who some of us don't want to do that, right? It's distracting and exhausting. It's yet another burden on you while you're trying to write and put food on your table, right? So, but I do know, I understand, and I understand that it happens. I have friends who've had books accepted and they've been told, get on Twitter immediately, right? And start like talking about your book. So, I mean, if you have the inclination to do that and the time and the chops, I think that's a very good investment, right? I'm not very good at it. And like I said, it's not my thing. So I haven't done it, and I've been very lucky. What happened to me, and I think what happened to a lot of people, is that when you're getting published, and if your book is about to get published, the studios and the media companies have scouts, right, who will be looking at books that are coming up and that are going to come out, and they'll be interested in people's fiction, right, in their books, and they might find you before you actually do anything, right? And then there's I mean, it's still happening, and I think pre-pandemic, of course, it was happening much more, is the book tour, right? Which again, I think has declined sadly since the decline of actual bricks and mortars bookstores, right? It was a really, really big thing in the 80s and 90s when I started publishing, the book tour. And I think if your publisher is not able to invest the time, it's worth the effort to actually like do. I know again it's distracting and it takes effort, but try and get in touch with bookstores yourself and talk your way into doing readings. Often in the independent bookstores, I'm sure you've seen those shelves which say recommended by our staff, right? So people will walk in, and the independent bookstore people will know, okay, this person has bought these 5 books in the last 2 years, and they'll say, okay, what should I read next? And that's how you get the word out also. I'm not sure this is a very encouraging or an informative or helpful reply, but it's part of the thing, and it's kind of depressing. Oh, I did read somebody do a search for literary it girls. I can't remember which website this was on. This is an article that just came out 2 or 3 days ago. And these are people who are influencers, right? Who are already influencers, and they have their books, and they're doing stuff like throwing parties and so forth, which I have to say is actually a very old idea, right? Like trying to get the word out, you try and like get your friends and you invite them to parties, and there's a publishing party. But these guys are doing it at with their skills at social media. They're actually, apparently these people are very good at it. And I don't know what I think about that title for the article, The Literary It Girl, but I guess I can see what connection they were trying to make, right, in terms of marketing oneself.
Mm.
All
But
right, well, thank you, Vikram. It was interesting to get your perspective.
so Vikram, if seeing as nobody else has raised their hand for the moment, to take a step back, though, I mean, even before you worry about how to sell your sub rights, comes the worry about how to sell your book. And in your case, you're saying that you have great agents. You seem to have a great relationship. Certainly, you speak of him with a lot of trust. How did you meet him? How did that relationship start?
So again, I was lucky, right? So as I actually was having the MFA talk with my students on Wednesday, and we continued on Monday. So, I mean, the talk being, do you need an MFA? What are the advantages of MFA programs? And one of them is that they introduce you to the milieu and the publishing industry, right? So again, what happens is that agents will be interested in finding new clients, and so they will have relationships with the teachers in the writing programs, and they'll want to know, is there anybody promising coming up? So at the University of Houston, my teacher was Donald Barthelme, and I worked pretty closely with him, and he was incredibly generous. And at some point, without telling me, he told his then agent, Lynn Nesbitt, right? And Lynn was at Janklow and Nesbitt, and Lynn was one of those legends, right, of the publishing industry. If you watch a movie from the 90s or early 2000s, and they're trying to get across the idea that the character is a high-powered publishing person, they'll say, "Oh, I just had lunch with Lynn Nesbitt." So he mentioned me to Lynn, and then Eric was a baby agent at the time at Janklow and Nesbitt. He was just starting out, and he read my stuff, and he got in touch, and we've been working together ever since, right? So, I mean, MFA programs, the other way that I know people meet agents, besides the cold letter, the cold email that you guys all are aware of, is at writing conferences, right? So I used to teach quite a bit at the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, and they had this 5-minute pitch thing there, right? So then a couple of agents would come through, and you quickly went and signed up on the board because slots would run out. And then you got 5 minutes to pitch your book to whoever, right? And I do know people who got publishing deals out of that, right? And without that, there's the really long and like grinding and often disappointing process, which you're all aware of, like I was saying, writing the cold email to the agent, right? With like, this is what my book is about. I attach, a PDF of 30 pages. And then, you get an acceptance or a rejection, sometimes frustratingly months later. And again, I know people who've succeeded in that, but it's like I was saying to the kids, that's one of the hurdles you have to get through, right? One more thing. I have a friend, Merzban Shroff, who I've known since 11th grade in Bombay, and he had a long career in advertising. And then at about 50, he said, "Okay, I'm gonna he's had enough to go and become a full-time writer." And he just started sending emails to journals across the world, right? The Kenyan Review, the Paris Review. And he just did it, and then his stories started getting published, and he's published 3 books now. And so I think, unlike the New Yorker, where if you send a cold manuscript, it's very, very hard to get anybody to read that, but the smaller journals, which are very good, if you start publishing in there, again, agents watch those, right? And if you look at any number of the best American short stories or the O. Henry Awards book, and you go to the back, you'll see how many of those books were published in journals, right? And so that's another method, an early method that one can adopt, right? And try out.